welcome to this episode of White Glove Geography. Today we're going to look at the human fieldwork section, and it's part 1, which is selecting a suitable question or hypothesis. We'll also be looking at the different evidence types and also the risk associated with this. There are 6 different questions in the inquiry. Question 1 is all about the suitable questions and hypothesis, which is what we're doing today. We're looking at the evidence types and also the risks. Number 2 is about selecting, measuring and recording data in different ways. Number 3 is once we've collected that data, how do we process it and how do we present it? Number 4, once we've presented the data, how do we describe it, analyse it and explain the fieldwork results? Number 5 is then reaching conclusions based upon the data collected, and number 6 is the evaluation. So, if we did this inquiry again, what would we do differently to make sure the data is more reliable and therefore the conclusions are more valid? In your booklets you've got section number 1A, and 1A will be writing down the question. Can you do this from memory? Just pause there, see if you can do that from memory, and then see if you can do it a second time, so 1A and the second bit underneath. Just to check, I'm going to give you the title, which is To What Extent Do Housing Inequalities Exist in Stoke-on-Trent? We'll just say that again. To what extent do housing inequalities exist in Stoke-on-Trent? That's the key question, the overarching question that we'll keep coming back to during this investigation. Then we've got 1B. 1B is all about what factors do we need to consider when we're selecting a suitable question. So put yourselves in the shoes of the teacher. What did we have to think about to make sure that we have a successful question? And the answer's here. And that is, the question needs to be a topic that links to an aspect of the course that we've studied. It needs to be carried out in an environment that's accessible, so it's easy to get to, and there needs to be some suitable information or data that can be collected. If you're happy with that, you might also want to think about how complex the inquiry should be. In terms of the exam, it's got to be simple data, maybe 2 sets of data, 3 at the most. Also think about the range of abilities of the students. So as a school, we need to be able to think about how do we support students who are getting grade 9, can they get grade 9 from this project, and also maybe students who need a little bit more support, or are they able to get their best grade possible through this inquiry. This section here, 1C part 1, is all about what is the geographical theory underpinning the inquiry, and that is about, there's got to be some geography behind what we're studying here, and thinking about the differences between the inequalities or the differences in housing in Stoke-on-Trent. The geographical theory is that there are inequalities in housing in any urban area, any city. The older terrace houses tend to be those in our city that are going to be in Shelton. They're going to be nearer to the city centre. Trentham is a newer area of houses which were built later, and that was the edge of the city. If you're happy with that, also think about including things like words like semi-detached, rented, owner-occupied, commuter belt, the building quality, the cost, rural, urban, fringe. Also think about the dates that the houses were built. Do you know when the different houses were built and what purpose they were built for? Section 1C part 2, which part of the specification content is the fieldwork linked to? Now of course it's helpful for students and also staff if what our inquiry or what our fieldwork is about is linked to the specification. So the link to the specification is Urban Issues and Challenges part 3, and that's where we study a city in the UK, which for us has been Stoke-on-Trent. The section we're looking at that is Urban Challenges and the section about inequalities in housing. So, if you're able to write down, it's linked to the Urban Challenges section. We're studying Stoke-on-Trent, it's a major UK city, and we're looking at the inequalities in housing. Section 1D That's where we need to look at the location of our inquiry area, so the location of data collection activities. On the map here, we've got the two locations, so number 1, that is Shelton, number 2, that is Trenton. So Trenton, which is the primary data collection, is located in the south of Stoke-on-Trent. It's close to major road links such as the M6, A500 and A34. Now, can you do the same for Shelton? Are you able to describe the location of Shelton? And don't forget to include a range of map skills. Can you include distances? Can you include the road names? Can you include compass directions? If you're happy with that and you're finished with that, have a look at the Also Think About box. How far apart are Trenton and Shelton? Can you find out an Ordnance Survey grid reference? And can you give a brief reference to its location within the context of the UK? Section 1E, that's where we're looking at primary and secondary sources of data. Primary evidence, that's the evidence or the data that we have collected at the location. We've collected it ourselves for a specific purpose. Secondary evidence, that's data or evidence that others have collected. It might be for different purposes, might be on a different date. So the primary data that we have used or will use, that's going to be building surveys and environmental quality surveys. That's where we're going to make a judgment, a score on the different elements of the buildings and the surrounding environment. Our secondary data, we're going to give a brief outline that is the council tax band data. We're going to a government website and find out the mode of the council tax on a certain street, so the most common band of council tax. We're also going to use Google Street View, and that's where we're going to collect the evidence for Shelton. Section 1F. One of the aspects that we're asked to talk to you about as students is the potential risks and how might they be reduced. So this could come up in an exam question, and the question might be identify the risks and suggest how they might be reduced. Now, as teachers, every trip that you go on, what's called a risk assessment will have taken place, and that's measured by assessing the severity of the risk or the potential risk and multiplying this by the likelihood of the risk. So you end up with a risk level, which is L multiplied by S. And then of course we've got to think about how do we mitigate the risk, how do we reduce the risk. The first risk that we've identified here is road and traffic dangers. Students are at risk, particularly when they're crossing roads, possibly in unfamiliar areas. Students are also at risk when they're crossing roads when there are large groups of people, as they'll often get distracted. As staff, we've mitigated this risk by giving a pre-visit briefing, also reminding students about the dangers, being distracted in groups, and we've selected quieter roads for surveys. There's also potential dangers of being approached by strangers, members of the public, so that's why, to mitigate this risk, you're going to work in groups of 2 or 3. We're going to coach you of what to say, how to handle possible difficult situations, and give you some kind of script of what to say if you're approached by a member of the public asking what you're doing. In emergency, there's also going to be a school phone number on the front of the booklet. If you're happy with all of those, then at each point where there's an asterisk, have a think about it so a pre-visit briefing so that